All right. So we're going to get started in chapter 32 of Isaiah. Um, we're getting near the center point, so we'll kind of things will shift a little bit. But right now, um, we are talking about our last section. We talked a little bit about both the um, this kind of woe to those who go down to Egypt, and talking about trusting in God instead of trusting in Egypt. But then at the very end of the chapter, we have this movement of what's going to happen to the Assyrians when they come to attack Jerusalem. And it's literally, they're just going to be wiped out by God. Okay. But then in chapter 32, we begin a kind of a different thing. It says, behold, hi, Kathy.
She went the wrong way too. I don't feel so bad now.
We can meet in there every time. It just, they're having youth in there. So I didn't know whether it would be easier to meet in here on Sunday nights. So whatever, we'll talk about it after.
Whatever works for you.
All right, so chapter 32. Yeah, that might not be a bad idea.
Oh, we're still in Isaiah?
Yeah, still Isaiah, chapter 32.
Go the other way.
No, you're right. Go back. That's the beginning of Isaiah. 11, 17, 24, 28, 30. We're almost there. There we go.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
All right. So, behold, a king will reign in righteousness, and princes will rule in justice. Okay. So we really are talking almost certainly about the reign of Jesus. Okay.
That's subtitle says they're coming.
Yeah. Okay. Each will be like a hiding place from the wind, a shelter from the storm, like streams of water in a dry place, like the shade of a great rock in the weary land. So the picture here is this. So behold, this king is going to come and reign, and the princes will rule in justice. Each one of them will be like a safe place in the midst of turmoil. There's Gib too. So we'll hold just a second. But notice each of these type of deals is a safe place in the middle of an issue. Right. So a hiding place from the wind. So a windbreak, a shelter from the storm, a roof over in the middle of the rain, like water in a dry place, like shade in a desert.
And that's important too.
What
verse is that?
Verse 1 and 2.
Okay. I'm trying too hard.
What?
I'm trying too hard.
Nope, you're fine. All right. Then the eyes of those who see will not be closed, and the eyes of those who hear will give attention. So this is kind of a idiomatic way of saying the one who sees will pay attention, the one who hears will listen. Because remember that there has been a deal earlier that was discussing this idea that they let the one who sees close his eyes, let the one who hears shut up his.
Oh yeah.
They're not paying any attention. So now at this point, under this new king and princes, the people will begin to pay attention. Okay. The heart of the hasty will understand and know. So the heart will understand. The tongue of the stammerer will hasten to speak distinctly. That's a fun word. Okay.
Yeah.
So notice, okay, the heart of one who wouldn't have understood before will understand now. The tongue of one who can't speak will be able to explain. Okay. The fool will no longer be called noble, nor the scoundrel said to be honorable. So literally this idea of no corrupt leaders. There'll be no corruption anymore. See, the one who's really a fool won't be thought of as noble, and right? And so we look at our culture now and we see people that really are foolish are called, and people that are really scoundrels and dirty and corrupt and all that are called honorable.
Sounds familiar.
Well, at this point, that will no longer happen. So verse 6 goes on, for the fool speaks folly, and his heart is busy with iniquity, to practice ungodliness, to utter error concerning the Lord. So the one who is a fool, this is a very real idea here. The one who is called a fool speaks folly and is full of iniquity and practices ungodliness and speaks things that are not true of the Lord. Now, this actually connects back to what the psalm we read this morning, because remember that the psalm that we read this morning, what is the first verse? The fool says in his heart, there is no God. Okay, so it's the same idea that the foolish one is one who does not acknowledge God. Okay, and they live for themselves, they speak error, and they leave the craving of the hungry unsatisfied and to deprive the thirsty of drink. So in their foolishness, they do not provide satisfaction. I heard a video over the last couple of days, and it was a comedian. He was joking around about the whole evolution creation thing. He goes, some people say that God created the universe, and he goes, and some people said that nothing created the universe. And he says, well, I mean, I'm not a scholar or anything, but it would seem. I mean, well, you can't prove God exists, but you can prove that nothing doesn't exist.
It's true. That is very true.
He says, they say, well, we don't want to believe in God because you can't see him, touch him, or prove that he exists. Well, nothing. So, but understand that they are so engrossed in their foolishness that they can't even see reason. Okay. And then it goes on, and as for the scoundrel, his devices are evil. He plans wicked schemes to ruin the poor with lying words, even when the plea of the needy is right. So we have first the fool who is without understanding. He denies God. He speaks error. He lives in sin. But then the scoundrel is even worse. He devises ways to extort other people. He devises ways to harm the poor. He devises ways to harm those who are in need. Okay. But he who is noble plans noble things, and on noble things he stands. So the writer of Isaiah is bringing back up the doubt. The fool will no longer be called noble, and the scoundrel will no longer said to be honorable, because they will actually know what nobility is. They will actually know what righteousness is. And so he's saying there is a difference. There is a reversal between the fool and the scoundrel and the one who is noble. And they'll finally understand that, because they'll have a noble king in the Messiah. Okay. Now, in verse 9, we move to an interesting discussion here. So, rise up, you women who are at ease, and hear my voice. You complacent daughters, give ear to my speech. So what is he talking about? Well, he is speaking of women who have everything handed to them and don't have to do anything.
Princesses.
Okay. They're living a life at ease, and they think, oh, everything's just hunky-dory. Okay.
Everybody else should too, no?
Right. Okay. In little more than a year, you will shudder, you complacent women. For the grape harvest fails and fruit harvest will not come. Tremble, you women who are at ease. Shudder, you complacent ones. Strip and make yourself bare, and tie sackcloth around your waist. So, mourn. Okay. So, the idea here is that there is this kind of idea that is being built here, that there is this group of people who are living in luxury regardless of what's going on with anybody else. They are completely at ease. They have nothing to worry about. They have plenty of finances. They don't have to do anything. And they're probably, the idea here is they're probably living off the back of those that are the scoundrels and the fools who are oppressing those who are in need. And what God is saying is, it won't be long before you'll find out what it is to be in need. Okay, you'll lose everything, and you'll have to take off your fine garments and tie burlap around your waist. Okay. And then this term in 12, it says, beat your breasts for the pleasant fields, for the fruitful vine. There's an old idea of that when you're in incredible pain and misery, you
I always wondered what they meant by that.
That's what that means, is you're beating your chest in agony.
It made me always think of gorillas.
And that's exactly kind of the idea. But it's an idea of agony. Okay. For the pleasant fields, for the fruitful vine, for the soil of my people growing up in thorns and briars. So it's saying, mourn for the fact that the fields that used to have all this stuff and the vines that used to be fruitful are now filled with thorns and thistles. The fruitfulness has gone. Okay, and remember that thorns and thistles are a discussion of sin.
Yep. They're part of the curse.
They're part of the curse.
Original sin.
So the idea of thorns and thistles comes back to the fact of judgment. Okay. Yes, for all the joyous houses in the exultant city. So you'll mourn for, the city that used to be so grand. For the palaces forsaken, the populous city deserted. The hill and the watchtower will become dens forever. So what does it mean? This city that used to be incredible will now become a wild animal den. A joy of wild donkeys, a pasture of flocks, until the Spirit is poured upon us from on high, and the wilderness becomes a fruitful field, and the fruitful field is deemed a forest. Then justice will dwell in the wilderness, and righteousness abide in the fruitful field. So there's an idea here as we look at this discussion of judgment here, is the judgment will be for a time until God reverses it, which is exactly what happens to Israel, is there's a judgment for 70 years, and then there's a reversal of that judgment. And the effect of righteousness will be peace, and the result of righteousness, quietness and trust forever. Now, I will tell you that some of this has not happened yet. Okay. My people will abide in peaceful habitation, in secure dwellings, and in quiet resting places. And it will hail when the forest falls down, and the city will be utterly laid low. Happy are you who sow beside all waters, who let the feet of the ox and the donkey range free. Kind of a weird ending to the discussion, but it's a discussion of both judgment and the reversal of judgment. Okay. Then in chapter 33, we move to this idea of they're calling for the graciousness of the Lord. And it says, you destroyer, who yourself have not been destroyed, you traitor whom none has betrayed. When you have ceased to destroy, you will be destroyed. And when you have finished betraying, they will betray you. So who are they talking about? they're talking about the enemies of Israel. Okay. God has given you all this dominion, and then suddenly it will be over. Okay. Then verse 2, O Lord, be gracious to us. We wait for you. Be our arm every morning, our salvation in the time of trouble. So the idea here is they're calling for the graciousness of the Lord and saying, we're waiting for you. Okay. And then they say, be our arm every morning. Now remember, the idea of the arm in the Old Testament refers to strength. Be our strength, be our power. Because remember, whenever we're talking about Egypt in the Exodus, what does it say? And I will stretch out my arm, God's arm of strength. So that's what that means when it says, be our arm, be our strength every morning, our salvation in the time of trouble. At the tumultuous noise, peoples flee. When you lift yourself up, nations are scattered, and your spoil is gathered as the caterpillar gathers. As locusts leap, it is leapt upon. So notice, this is a prayer in the way this is working. Be gracious to us, Lord. Be our strength. Be our salvation. Let us see it as you rise and the nations scatter. When you finally rise up to move, everything changes. Verse 5, the Lord is exalted, for he dwells on high. He will fill Zion with justice and righteousness, and he will be the stability of your times. Abundance of salvation, wisdom, and knowledge. The fear of the Lord is Zion's treasure. So notice the picture that is being brought here. Fearing God is the wealth of the city of God. Zion is the city of the Lord. Okay, now what it typically means is Jerusalem, but Zion is a term for the God's city. Okay, and he's saying the treasure of that is fearing God. And then it goes on, behold, their heroes cry in the streets, the envoys of peace weep bitterly. So behold, their greatest warriors are crying in the streets. The ones who have looked for peace are weeping bitterly because there is no. The highways lay waste, the travelers cease, covenants are broken, cities are despised, there is no regard for man. The land mourns and languishes. Lebanon is confounded and withers away. Sharon is like a desert, and Bashan and Carmel shake off their leaves. So he names a few places in the midst of this. But the idea is that God is moving and destroying the wickedness of the nations. Okay. Lebanon, which is Syria, is the place north of them. Sharon is another city. It's devoid of life. It's like a desert. And then Bashan and Carmel, this is kind of a neat thing. They are known for forests, but they shake off their leaves. So a tree that shakes off his leaves is what? It's dead. Or at least, depending on what you're talking about, but the truth is their life is over. So they have gone.
Trees that come back every year die every year?
No, but they go into a time where they stop growing.
Okay.
So whenever you have all the leaves fall, the tree is dormant. It doesn't really grow at all. That's actually why, or very, very little. That's actually why you see the rings in the trunk of a tree, is that during the time of year where it's nice and they get a lot of nourishment, they grow quite a bit. And then that dark spot is just a little bit of winter. In fact, you can even go through and you can look and there'll be much thicker dark areas if it's been a really bad year. You can actually see what the conditions were like each year in the rings of a tree. But the idea is they've shaken off their leaves. They have stopped. Okay. Verse 10, now I will arise, says the Lord. Now I will lift myself up. Now I will be exalted. You conceive chaff. You give birth to stubble. Now, What is chaff and stubble?
Like the part of the wheat that don't need.
It's the worthless part.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mine says dried grass and stuff.
So the chaff is when you harvest wheat, the chaff is the real light, flimsy bit that just gets blown away. And the stubble is what you either burn or plow under. We don't do it as much here anymore. They still do it quite a bit in like Portales and there, that you'll have a wheat field once it's been harvested and all that's left is the stubble. They'll burn the whole field.
Do they still do that?
Some.
Because I know it's not as popular.
It's not as popular as it used to be. But supposedly it would move nutrients into the ground for the next crop. It really isn't all that great at it, but some still do that. And you'll just be driving between like Portales and Clovis and see this huge plume of smoke, and have a bunch of guys will be around the outskirts of a field watching, making sure it doesn't get away from them.
That's cool.
But that's the idea. It's part of it that is worthless for anything but burning, really. And not really worth it for burning for heat.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Get
See.
rid of the bad stuff.
right. So it goes on. Now, give birth to stubble. Your breath is a fire that will consume you, and the people will be as if burned to lime, like thorns cut down that are burned in the fire. So you see the picture. It's worthless. I will arise, and the people that he's rising to take vengeance on are worthless. Hear, you who are far off, what I have done. And you who are near, acknowledge my might. The sinners in Zion are afraid. Trembling has seized the godless. Who among us can dwell with the consuming fire? Who among us can dwell with everlasting burnings? So notice, we're talking about the wicked outside, but we're also talking about the wicked inside. And Isaiah even goes so far as to say, amongst all of the people in Zion, who among us will survive if God is burning out if God is constantly burning out the wicked? And he answers and he says, he who walks righteously and speaks uprightly, who despises the gain of oppression, who shakes his hands lest they hold a bribe. So notice, the one who walks in rightness, who speaks in rightness, who doesn't oppress others, and who does anything they can do to make sure not to take a bribe. Who stops his ears from hearing of bloodshed, and who shuts his eyes from looking on evil. He will dwell on the heights. His place of defense will be the fortresses of rocks. His bread will be given him. His water will be sure. Okay, let's go back for just a second. Who stops his ears from hearing of bloodshed. It's not saying that he doesn't step in, but what it means is if a buddy comes and, hey, let's, then no. Okay. It's not talking about not defending the weak. It's talking about the fact of shutting your ears, not even thinking about
Doing something.
right.
No temptation.
Right. Resisting temptation. Okay. Your eyes will behold the king in his beauty. They will see a land that stretches afar. Your heart will muse on the terror. Who is he who counted? Where is he who weighed the tribute? Where is he who counted the towers? You will see no more the insolent people, the people of an obscure speech that you cannot comprehend, stammering in a tongue that you cannot understand. Behold, Zion, the city of our appointed feasts. Your eyes will see Jerusalem, an untroubled habitation, an immovable tent, whose stakes will never be plucked up, nor will any of its cords be broken. So it's almost clear that what we're talking about at this point is the new Jerusalem, The wicked have been defeated. The wicked have been destroyed. Wickedness is a thing of the past, and no more will Jerusalem be ravaged.
So this will be after he comes back.
Yes. Okay. So, but there the Lord in majesty will be for us, a place of broad rivers and streams, where no galley with oars can go, nor a majestic ship can pass. For the Lord is our judge, the Lord is our lawgiver, the Lord is our king. He will save us. All right. Your cords hang loose. They cannot hold the mast firm in its place or keep the sail spread out. Then prey and spoil in abundance will be divided. Even the lame will take the prey. And no inhabitant will say, I am sick. The people who dwell there will be forgiven their iniquity. Okay, and then in verse 34, we move to once again the nations and we talk about judgment again. There's a bit of this in the beginning of Isaiah. Draw near, O nations, to hear, and give attention, O peoples. Let the earth hear and all that fill it, the world and all that comes from it. So let everybody pay attention. Wake up, O nations, and listen. For the Lord is enraged against all the nations and furious against all their host. He has devoted them to destruction, has given them over for slaughter. Now, this is an important discussion here, okay? So, we're talking about the nations. And when we do this, we are talking about the lost of the world when we talk about the nations, okay? Now, there is a word here that is used that we need to make sure. It says, he has devoted them to destruction. Okay. Now, the reason I bring this up is this is the terminology that was used by God in Joshua in talking about Jericho. Okay. Now, so let me explain. There is an idea within the Old Testament that when God, a couple of places that God goes, I am placing this under the term we often use is under the ban. Okay. And what it means is this place is devoted. It is going to be destroyed. You don't take anything. You don't keep anything. You don't let anything live. You don't let anything stand. It all goes. Utter and complete destruction. Now, in the case of Joshua and Jericho, there is one exception to that.
The chick in the wall.
Yeah, Rahab.
That's her name, Rahab.
Okay. Now, remember, and this is the idea, and it's very clear in the way this is drawn up in Joshua. Joshua tells the people, okay, don't take any of the money, don't take any of the valuables, don't take any of the livestock, don't take anybody as a slave. You kill them all. The only exception was he told the two spies that had gone into Jericho before, you go in and you get Rahab and her family if they are in the place you told them to wait. And then you get them out, and then after that, nobody survives. Okay? And the spies had told Rahab, if you are not in your house with your family with a red cord hanging out your wall window, you die.
Which I thought that was so cool, dude.
So here is the interesting part of this, and we'll look at it later for this. There is a if you don't know anything about archaeology, the funny thing is often cities are built on top of each other.
Yeah.
Okay, and Jericho has been rebuilt a bunch. There's there's 8 sets of ruins, I think, right on top of each other. Okay. But the one that is at the time of the Exodus, one that would be that one, it is clear that the walls of the city fell outward, except for one small corner.
Presumably where
It would have been where Rahab lived.
Yep.
Because it said very clearly she lived in the wall.
Yep.
Her house was inside the wall. Now, what you learn pretty quick about Jericho during that time is the way it would have worked, and understand that there would have been, the wall would have been of two parts. There would have been a rampart, which would have been a huge earthen mound, okay, that would have led up to the wall at about a 45, 50-degree angle, okay, just of dirt. So they had built a huge dirt from the floor, from the ground outside the city. Well, why do you do that? Well, it makes it very hard to get to the wall, okay? Because think about full armor holding a weapon trying to climb a 50-degree grade. Okay.
Really suck.
And then on top of that, they had the walls.
Yeah.
Now, the Bible tells us that the walls of Jericho were so thick, you could race chariots across the top. So you could go too wide with a chariot.
Yeah, which is not a small thing.
Okay. Which makes perfect sense if people had their houses in the walls.
Yeah. I think it would be cool to live in a wall.
Okay. But God, whenever he tells Joshua to go and take Jericho, he places it under the ban. And he says, other than Rahab and her family, okay, everything dies. Now, the Israelites don't fulfill that.
Oh,
Well,
yeah, 'cause of
They
this
kill
place.
everybody, except the killing they do. But a guy by the name of Achan, which, by the way, his parents may should have known better because his name meant trouble.
Huh, did it?
Yeah.
Why would you ever name your kid that?
Okay, his name. And by the way, we don't actually know if it isn't a nickname that was given to him after he died. That the Bible didn't, the names, the names have been changed to protect the guilty, but anyway, the valley is named the Valley of Achan, or the Valley of Trouble. So we don't actually know if that was his real name or whether that was a name they used because he was the troubler of Israel.
That's when the ground swallowed up him and his
Him
whole
and his
tribe.
whole family.
His whole family.
Probably was a nickname.
Oh, yeah,
After the fact,
probably. After the fact, he was just trouble.
Okay. And he took something, and so they lost the next battle and then found out that he had done something he wasn't supposed to, so him and his whole family dies. Okay. But the same phrasing is used here. He has devoted them to destruction. No one survives. No one gets a second chance anymore. Okay. Now, this is a very important detail in this. Okay. So, what did God tell the children of Israel to do when they went into the promised land?
To follow his rules and
Well,
not to marry
but
the,
one of his rules was you go in and kill everybody. You don't spare people. You don't marry their daughters. You don't let
because
your
they-
daughters
they
marry
ruined
their
the land and
sons.
They deserve to.
Okay, now, a lot of people in our culture today make a big deal about, oh my gosh, I can't
It's
believe that
genocide.
God would do that. That's genocide. And look at how evil this
That's all
God
about
is.
genocide.
Okay, you've heard me say this before, but in Genesis, we see as God is talking to Abraham, okay, he tells Abraham that, look, in a couple of generations, your people are going to be taken off this land and they're going to be slaves in another country for 400 years. Okay, now we all know that story. Joseph, he goes to Egypt, the brothers come, and 70 Hebrews, the whole group, all 70 of them, end up living in the northern part of Egypt. And they live there for about 30 years, around 30 years in peace. And then the Egyptians see how fast they reproduce. I mean, and literally the way the Bible talks about it is almost the joke about, they bred like rabbits. They're multiplying so fast that they go, oh my gosh, they'll conspire with our enemies and they'll overthrow us. So they enslaved them. And they lived in slavery for 400 years. Okay. But when he's talking to Abraham, he tells Abraham why they have to live in Egypt for 400 years. And he says, so that the sins of the Philistine, or the sins of the Canaanites, may be complete. So God spent 400 years waiting till the sins of the Canaanites got so bad and their rebellion against him had gotten so bad that it was just for them all to die. So guess what? During that 400 years, they had opportunities to turn.
Probably lots.
But they refused. They worshiped their idols. But remember, Romans tells us very clearly that God is revealed in the creation. But they didn't worship him. They worshiped Baal and they worshiped Ashtoreth. Oh, the god of the storm and the goddess of fertility and the goddess of whatever else crazy stuff. They sacrificed their children to them. And finally, they hit the point, by the way, the same point that you see Sodom and Gomorrah hit. Okay, understand. God is trying to make a case to show us how this works. And it's really a part of the book of Genesis and some of the stories we get. Okay, remember, God and two angels show up at Abraham's house. And by the way, that is what it says. It says that God himself showed up at Abraham's house. And he talks to him about Isaac first. And as he's getting ready to leave, Abraham goes, so why'd you really show up? And he goes, well, I'm on my way down to Sodom and Gomorrah because I have heard from heaven the cries of the people of the wickedness of Sodom and Gomorrah. And so I'm going to double check and make sure it's as wicked as what they say, which sounds a little weird because did God already know? Yes. Yeah. Okay. But there's a point here, and that's why I'm bringing this up. What does Abraham then begin to do?
About if there's so many good people.
Oh, yeah.
So Abraham goes, so what if in this city of thousands of people, maybe tens of thousands of people, what if there are 50 people who are still righteous? Just 50. We don't know exactly how big Sodom and Gomorrah was, but it was apparently fairly sizable.
Yeah.
The population would have easily been in the thousands. So what if 50? Okay, so let's do it this way. What if 5%? Let's say that the population was 2,000 or whatever, 5%. Then I won't destroy it. Well, okay, so okay, 50, yeah, that's pretty good. What if there's just 5 less? Will you destroy the city for 5 less? 45. No. What if there's only 40? No, I won't destroy it. What if there's 30? No, I won't destroy it. What if there's 20? No, I won't destroy it. And finally he goes, what if in this city of thousands, there are 10 people? Just 10 that have not fallen into the sin that Sodom and Gomorrah is so well known for. And God goes, for the sake of 10 people, I would let the whole city live. When you count it, there were 5.
So he would let them live for 10, but not for 5, which I totally
But
get.
here's the other
That's
half.
a lot of people.
Why does Abraham stop at 10?
I don't know. Why did he stop at 10?
If he will spare a huge city for 10, then he's not going to kill the 10. What does he do? They go in and they get out The
The
five.
5.
Now, one of them decides to look back,
Yeah. Lot's wife.
and
right?
Lot's and the rest of Lot's life in the Bible is atrocious. And it may actually be 4. I can't remember if it's 2 or 3 daughters for Lot, but it's 2. So then it's 4 people.
Oh, gosh.
Okay. Lot's wife dies. And then Lot's daughters later get him drunk
yeah,
and sleep with
seduce
him
him
to get
To get a
kids.
kid.
The rest of Lot's life is miserable.
Yeah.
But here is the thing, okay? If that is the character of the God we serve, then when it says he has devoted them to destruction, he has given them over for slaughter, it means that
There is
they
no
are
delivery.
without,
Anything.
they are absolutely beyond devastatingly wicked. Okay, am I saying that the righteous never die with the wicked? No, I'm not saying that. But here's the funny part. So let's use an example from our history. In fact, we'll be celebrating or remembering the anniversary this next week. But 9/11. Okay. Can we honestly say, oh yeah, everybody who died in 9/11 was wicked? No. In fact, I can't even say that I could be sure that the majority were.
Yeah.
But here is the thing. So if the person was righteous, if they had Christ in their life, what happened when they died in the building?
They went to heaven.
They went to heaven.
Yeah, because I'm sure there was some on that plane that helped bring it down before.
Okay. So understand that I'm not saying that someone dying in a catastrophe means they were wicked. What I am saying is that, and let's use it this way, for the believer, death is an escape. Death is not a punishment to the believer. Death is an escape. Death is a chance to finally be in the presence of Almighty God. In fact, Jesus even goes in one of the Psalms and says, blessed is it when the righteous die. It's a blessing when the righteous die, because they no longer have to deal with this.
Yeah, like one less person they got to deal with.
I mean, it's they get to be in heaven. They're not sick anymore. They're not hurt anymore. They're not. It's over.
No more pain and nothing. No arthritis, no nothing.
Okay. So then it goes on and it says in verse 3, it continues because we want to finish this. Want to finish at least to verse 5. We'll see how we go. Their slain shall be cast out, and the stench of their corpses shall rise. So many people are going to die, they're not even going to be able to bury them.
Like there's not going to be enough room, and that's just too many people.
Just too many people.
What do you do? Just
Burn. The thing is that is, in some wartime, that's an issue. And sometimes you burn the body or whatever, but it almost seems like the idea is there's not even that. In the New Testament, it goes so far as to say that at the final battle, that an angel calls out to the birds and the beasts and say, hey, come have a feast. Today you get to dine on the bodies of kings and princes. The bigwigs of the earth, you get to come and eat. There is a point at which there are just so many dead, you can't do anything with them. And that's the idea. Now, the thing of it is so notice how it says, the stench of their corpses shall rise, the mountains shall flow with their blood. So very, very graphic. Okay. Now, all the host of heaven shall rot away, and the skies roll up like a scroll. So what is it talking about? It's talking about the stars. It's talking about the moon. It's talking about the sun. Talking about all of that. And then it goes on. It says, all their hosts shall fall as leaves fall from the vine. So think about in the very end of fall, an oak tree, an oak sapling. What happens if you walk up right at the end of fall and shake the tree?
The leaves will fall off.
All the leaves fall off. That's what he's talking about the stars. Now, this is clearly a discussion of the end, because this is the same thing that Jesus talks about to John about what happens at the end, that the heavens are shaken and the stars fall. And so understand, their bodies won't stay there long.
What verse you on?
Verse 4 of chapter 34. Okay.
Yeah,
So-
it's kind of like now, like the vultures, like they
Yeah.
clean up everything, coyotes and
Eventually,
Vultures are cool. They can eat just about anything.
then in verse 5, it goes, "For my sword has drunk its fill in the heavens. Behold, it descends for judgment upon Edom, for upon the people I have devoted to destruction." And this is a scary discussion. Okay. The Lord has a sword. It is sated with blood. It is gorged with fat, with the blood of lambs and goats, with the fat of kidneys of rams. For the Lord has a sacrifice in Bozrah, a great slaughter in the land of Edom. Okay, now Edom is what is modern day Jordan. Okay, the idea here is, and by the way, we're coming back to this discussion. This would have been the place around where we hear this discussion of the plain of Megiddo or Armageddon. It's really talking about the same discussion. Okay, and now notice, the Lord has a weapon that is sated with blood. Now it talks about the blood of lambs and goats and with the fat of the kidneys of ram. What is it talking about? It's talking about the sacrificial system. Okay, because that was a big thing. The blood of the lamb and goat and the fat on the lobe of the kidney was a big part of the
Yeah.
sacrifice. And so then suddenly he is comparing that with the people. For the Lord has a sacrifice in Bozrah and a great slaughter in the land of Edom. Wild oxen shall fall with them, and young steers with the mighty bulls. The land shall drink its fill of blood, and their soil shall be gorged with fat. For the Lord has a day of vengeance. Now, I want to make sure we see this because it is important to understand. It's not, as while it is, it's also not. It's not a day of justice. It's a day of vengeance.
Yeah, mine says revenge.
Now, is it just? Yes, because it's God. But the purpose is vengeance over the wickedness of people and their wholesale slaughter of God's people. Okay, a year of recompense for the God of Zion, for the cause of Zion. And the streams of Edom shall be turned into pitch, and her soil into sulfur. Her land shall become burning pitch. Night and day it shall not be quenched. Its smoke shall go up forever. From generation to generation it shall lie waste. None shall pass through it forever and ever. But the hawk and we've talked about this before, that they're not really sure what animal this is. The porcupine is how mine phrases it, or the hedgehog. Mm-hmm. Okay.
What verse you on?
Verse 11.
Mine says the desert owl and the screech owl,
Mm-hmm.
or the raven.
The pelican and the hedgehog.
Yeah. So they don't know exactly what animal he's
Some
talking
kind of
about.
animal.
Okay. The owl and the raven shall dwell in it. He shall stretch the line of confusion over it, and the plumb line of emptiness. Its nobles, there is no one there to call it a kingdom, and all its princes shall be nothing. So okay, we can do that. Thorns shall grow in its strongholds, nettles and thistles in its fortresses. It shall be the haunt of jackals and the abode of ostriches. A wild animal and wild animals shall meet with hyenas. The wild goat shall cry to its fellow. Indeed, there the night bird settles and finds for herself a resting place. So what is he saying? It's going to be a complete and total wilderness.
We go back to nature.
There's nothing. There the owl nests and lays and hatches and gathers her young in her shadow. Indeed, there the hawks are gathered, each one with her mate. Seek and read from the book of the Lord. Not one of these shall be missing. None shall be without her mate. For the mouth of the Lord is commanded, and his spirit has gathered them. He has cast the lot for them. His hand has portioned it out to them with a line. They shall possess it forever. From generation to generation, they shall dwell in it. All of humanity, apart from those who are his, will be gone. All right, we will stop right there. The nice thing is that starting in 35, there's some good news for a little bit. We'll have 35, which is the last of the 35 is the last of the poetry for a little bit. And then in chapter 36, we're going to move to some narrative, talking about the Assyrian invasion. Okay. Once the Assyrian invasion is over, things change a little bit. So 36, 37, wait, let me make sure that I got this down right. 36, 37, 38, and I think 39. Sure. And 39. End the first book of Isaiah. So I know that sounds weird, but there is kind of a system in Isaiah that there's two books. The first book ends at Hezekiah and the discussion of him allowing Babylon to come in and see the treasure room.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that's how 39 ends. 39 is all of 7 verses or 8 verses. And then in chapter 40, we begin the long, there'll still be some similar to what we've had before, but 40 begins the message of the servant, which is Jesus. So the discussion of the suffering servant, the discussion of God's mercy to Jerusalem and all of that. There'll be a lot of, one of the things that's often referred to of Isaiah is that Isaiah is the gospel of the Old Testament. And we'll start to see some of that as we move forward. But we'll have to get through a large military campaign before we get there.